Hi everyone, good morning, good Sunday morning. This is Sarah with She Tries. I'm here at Joints in Motion in Mount Pleasant. They also have a location in Goose Creek. I'm here with Adam Smith and Matt Fansler. And so we're going to talk a little bit today about running and your run form and how to know some things to do to feel better with running and all the work that they do here at Joints in Motion. And what's super exciting is this Wednesday coming up is their 10-year anniversary. So we're super proud of them and the work they do in the community. They're also athletes themselves, so they're used to working with people who want to be in motion. And we think they're a perfect fit for partnership with She Tries. So I'm going to turn it over to them to tell them a little bit more about themselves and what they do here. And then we're going to talk a bit about running and how to avoid injury and the clinic that you can sign up here to do later this month. So Adam, go for it.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be a part of this group. Just a little bit more about us. Joints in Motion, our office is basically a manual therapy-based hands-on clinic. So when I say manual therapy hands-on, what I mean is we're not necessarily doing massage on every single person, but when it comes to exercises, when it comes to treatment, everything we do revolves around our hands cueing people to fire the right muscles and move the right way. If you ever had physical therapy before, that's kind of the way we feel it should be done. It shouldn't be the type of thing where somebody goes into the corner and just does exercises while somebody counts a repetition of how many you're doing. We really feel like everything that you're doing in a clinic should be something that you really aren't doing at home. The stuff that you can do at home where it's just 1, 2, 3, do it at home. The stuff we do here, hopefully highly skilled, where we're cueing muscles to work the right way and then mobilizing you to make sure that you're moving the right way. So with that, we're both people who have been marathon runners, triathletes, and we kind of know a little bit about the breakdown that comes along with that, and so we're excited to help with you guys along your journey.
Awesome. Do you want to add anything?
Can I talk about RunHab for 1 second?
Yeah, please.
So we have a new program here called RunHab Charleston, and basically we have the physical therapy kind of people that that Adam's kind of talking about, where you have an injury, you come to physical therapy, you heal up, and then you return to running. We also have a new program it's a cash-based kind of performance program called RunHab, and this is kind of specifically for runners, where we come in and we do a strength and mobility screen, and then we kind of look at you and do a video gait analysis and give you some exercises kind of to prevent injury, or it's kind of for that anybody from that entry-level runner who really wants to get going and start on the right foot, prevent injury. Anybody from that to like the higher-level runner who maybe they're kind of breaking down at mile 22 of the marathon, or they just can't they plateaued and they can't quite get their PR after a couple years. So they're trying to kind of get that higher level of performance and do some strength stuff with that. So.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, and full disclosure, I'm also a patient here because some of you know I've been having to rehab a hamstring glute injury that's been plaguing me for a few months, and already made a huge difference coming here and doing the work with Matt. So highly recommend them. What would you guys say are some of the frequent complaints or injuries that you see from runners here, or athletes in general that are in the triathlon world?
Should we start with let's have you knee pain first?
Yeah. So I would say one of the most common is that runner's knee, that pain that runners get in the very front of their knee. Kind of feels like it might be their kneecap, but sometimes it's a little bit to the outside of their kneecap or just right behind their kneecap. That's probably the number one thing we see when it comes to endurance runners. And the curious thing about that is it's often not really the knee that's the source of the problem, right? Your knee often we say is like the innocent middleman, where your foot might be breaking down, or you might not be in the right shoe, or you don't have the right control at your foot, or potentially you don't have the right amount of strength at your hip. And so everything breaks down right in the middle, and your knee gets the brunt of the problems, okay? So what we see, is it okay if I stand up for just a second? I'm gonna stand just so you guys can see it. I'm gonna stand on my chair. Thank you. If I fall during this webcam, then everybody knows to call 911. So what we see a lot of times with a runner is people, when they run and they land, their knee dives in. or if they squat, a lot of times part of our assessment will be where their knees will turn in like this. And that's not really your knee being the problem, but it's your knee that'll get the brunt of the issue, because what happens is if your thigh turns in relationship to that, we think that the kneecap sits more to the outside, and it'll end up wearing on the bone underneath. That kneecap will wear on the femoral condyle, which is like your thigh bone. And often the reason for that is we don't have enough strength in our glutes to stabilize here. And so we drop off like this, or we drop off like this. Or a lot of us who have that flat foot, that pancake foot, when you step in the sand and you get the whole foot planted in the ground, the shin, once you land, will turn in. We call that internal rotation. And if we don't have enough strength and control in our hip to compensate for that, then this happens, okay? And I think we're going to talk about this later, but what happens is there's a few screening things we'll do where we can kind of figure out if that's one of the issues. But when it comes to running, whether it be hip strength, quad strength, the right foot gear, the right foot strength, that kind of the intrinsic foot muscles being strong, those things can lead to a lot of issues where you'll feel it at your knee, and that's one of the most common things we'll notice, okay? Leads to, you've heard of IT band syndrome. All of those kind of fall along the same line of diagnosis and very similar reasons for it.
Awesome.
Heel pain is another common thing we see with runners. Kind of the classic idea of plantar fasciitis would be that if you think about your plantar fascia, it's that kind of really, really thick fibrous tissue that goes from like the heel to the top of your foot, okay? And the classic example of that is kind of like you wake up in the morning, first 5 steps are super, super painful. Once you get going, it kind of warms up, loosens up, and you feel better. First thing, when you first start running, it hurts really, really bad. Once it loosens up, it kind of gets, it loosens up, it feels good, and then when you're finished running, it kind of tightens up again, and really, really, it can be really painful. So with this, a lot of times it overlaps a little bit with what Adam said. So maybe your mobility is not there in your ankle, and so if your ankle mobility is not where it needs to be, you're going to compensate in some way, right? And so when we show you like our movement screen stuff, we'll explain this a little more, but when you're doing like a squat, for example, I'm looking at if your knees are turning in, when you're running, when we do your video gait analysis, we're looking if your knees are turning in, if you don't have enough ankle mobility, you're going to get that somewhere else, right? And so if you don't have, a lot of people have a lack of dorsiflexion, which is kind of like that foot coming up towards you, okay? And if you can't roll through your foot in order to kind of get behind your body, you're going to compensate in some way. And a lot of times, the plantar fascia kind of takes the brunt of that force. And so having really strong feet, stretching your calves, getting your ankles nice and mobile is kind of a way that we would really treat that. And we'll go over that a little bit, I think, coming up.
Yeah, awesome. Well, those are all things that I know I've complained about and that I've heard from women in our community. So I know these tips are going to be extra helpful. And like I said, we'll make it more clear at the end too, but there will be an assessment that you guys can sign up for where you come in person. They're super safe here with all the COVID protocols, and they would have you come in so that we wouldn't have one big group at one time. You'd sign up for a time, and they can go through and look at these things with you so that they can determine what you might want to work on at home, or you could sign up for some sessions with them if that's what was best for you guys. So with that, we're going to talk about what's involved in that run assessment. Before though, let's talk about your favorite exercises, because I'm always curious with people who work regularly with runners and with athletes. They have so much knowledge of what we can just be doing on our own. So we're going to get those from you. And if you guys have questions, feel free to put them in the comments, and we'll ask them to our experts here while we have them. So with that, I'm going to get out of the way and let them show their favorite exercises, and then we'll show you what a run assessment looks like. I'm going to flip this around.
So just a quick heads up about why we're doing this, okay? So I'm about to show you a hip flexor stretch. Many of you have probably done a hip flexor stretch before, but we often see that a hip flexor stretch is done just incorrectly. The reason we do the hip flexor stretch for a number of reasons. One, when it comes to runners and low back pain, we kind of think that the hip flexor, specifically your iliopsoas muscle, your iliopsoas muscle is a muscle that attaches at the front of your spine, runs through your pelvic girdle to your leg. And often what happens is for people who are tight, you know, we sit all day, a lot of our jobs are sitting, we get tight. For our triathletes, people who are on the bike all the time and then have to get into a running position, if we get tight in our hip flexors and then we attempt to run, so we're standing up straight, or as we're running, our hip extends, what happens in our back is we start to bow, we start to arch, and that can lead to a lot of compression and a lot of the back problems that we have. So hip flexor stretching, very, very important. The other thing is with muscle imbalances, the concept of a muscle imbalance, I want you to kind of understand this. If I flex my bicep, and I'm not posing for the camera, but if I flex my bicep, it turns my, okay, I am a little bit. It turns my tricep off. If I flex my tricep, it turns my bicep off. If my hip flexors are really tight and always on a little bit, the opposite muscle is my glute. And for our runners and for our cyclists, we need our glutes working. But those hip flexors can inhibit the glutes. So the more we can kind of stretch out the hip flexors, get them a little bit looser, the more we'll be able to fire our glute muscles, which, as we spoke about before when it came to the knee, incredibly important, okay? So I'm going to show you a hip flexor stretch. Hopefully, I'm going to get down on the knee so hopefully you can see. Let's say I'm trying to stretch my right hip flexor, okay? I'll get down on one knee, and what I see most people do is they'll do this when they're trying to do a hip flexor stretch. If you let your back arch like that curve, two things are happening. One, you're doing the opposite thing of what we're trying to avoid when we're running. And two, you're not going to get that full stretch of your hip flexor. So what I tell people to do is the initial thing that you do is what we call a posterior pelvic tilt. If any of you guys are older, the thing I cue them is if you've ever seen the Three Amigos movie, you got to do this, the Three Amigos, and then the hip thrust. The hip thrust is the most important part of this stretch. You do the hip thrust, you squeeze your glute really hard. As soon as I squeeze my butt, I feel a stretch in the front of my thigh. That's what I want. You want to feel it kind of front of the hip, down the thigh. I keep that squeeze, and I try and move forward without letting this happen. So I can't go that far. Maybe it's a little bit of the genes, mostly the hip flexor tightness. Tight, coming forward, keeping that squeeze. So that's good because the more I squeeze my glute, the more I turn off my hip flexor. So I'm keeping that squeeze, and I feel a big stretch there. This stretch you want to hold for at least 30 seconds. For those people who sit all day, you can do this 3 or 4 times a day. This is an important one, okay? All right, and then I think this is a good one to activate right before you run. So you're activating your glutes, you're turning off your hip flexor right before you run and right after you run. All right? All right.
Awesome.
Cool.
Okay. Adam talked a little bit about knee pain and alignment stuff. So I'm going to show you an exercise where you can kind of do a little self-assessment with that, okay? What he kind of means here is like, I call it like a collapsing mechanics when you're running. And so if you can imagine, you've probably seen people that kind of, when they land, their knee turns in and their hip drops and they maybe do a little like lean like this. A lot of times that's a matter of, is your quad strong enough? Are your glutes strong enough? Is your core strong enough? Are you able to activate them? Kind of like what Adam said, are you in the proper posture to be able to kind of activate these muscles at the right time? And so one exercise that kind of puts it all together with it's a good alignment exercise is, it's like a little modified single leg squat. So you're on a step, okay? And really I would recommend doing this in front of a mirror. Am I good?
Yeah, you're good.
You want to just kind of come up to the side of the step here. And all you're going to do is kind of squat. You're going to keep this leg straight. You're going to bend here. You're going to squat down and just touch your heel to the ground and back up. Now, what you want to do is keep your knee facing forward the whole time. You want to think about keeping your hips kind of even and lined up and your shoulders kind of lined up. So everything is in line. You don't want to do a big weight shift. You don't want to have your knee cave in, right? And so a lot of times what we'll see if people aren't super experienced with this and their hips aren't really strong is they'll start doing things like this. Or if they keep their knees straight, they'll compensate by doing this, okay? So we want to kind of keep everything in line, touch, and back down, back up, right? And I recommend doing it with shoes on and then try with shoes off and see if that's a difference because shoes are providing a lot of stability when you're running, okay? And so if you don't have that stability with your foot, it might be much, much harder to do, and that kind of tells us some stuff. Okay? So do both. I would do it in front of a mirror so you really can see yourself, or videotape if you don't have a mirror. And, yeah.
So if I can quick say, so for running, we have to realize running is a running single leg jump activity, right? So every time we run, it's this and then this. And that landing process, that landing here, is very similar to what Matt just explained. So the importance of being able to control your leg every time you land is why we're doing that, okay? So it all comes together later, but that exercise and the way Matt showed it is exactly what we're looking for during that running analysis later on. Okay.
Awesome. Those are excellent. So one other thing Adam mentioned is strength training and cross training as part of these at-home exercises. Do you want to say something really quick about that?
Yes. So you have to realize in any sport, whether it be baseball, football, anything like that, every sport, in order to train for it, you can't just play that sport, okay? Athletes have to rest. Overhand athletes have to rest doing that. Football players have to do things other than football. And a lot of times for endurance athletes, you have to realize strength training, flexibility, mobility are so important, okay? Your endurance athletes, you're doing the same thing over and over and over again. That does lead to breakdown unless you get things strong and stable. When it comes to the swimming component of things, you have to have strong rotator cuff muscles. That overhand movement is not a natural one for the shoulder to do. So if you're swimming and you don't have that shoulder stability, that rotator cuff strength, it can lead to breakdown. When it comes to biking, if you don't have that hip flexor flexibility, that can lead to things down the road. And when it comes to running, you have to have that lower extremity strength to power through some of the things you're going to do. You have to have that glute strength so that you can keep your knee in the right place. You have to have quad strength for the hills. If you guys aren't just running, I know we're in Charleston, but some of us run the bridge and a lot of our races aren't always on flat. But the more uneven surfaces, we got to have that quad strength to handle some of that load, especially on the descent. Everybody thinks the ascent is the hardest. The breakdown comes from the descent because that's when we have to control our bodies. And if we don't have that control, it won't be there for us when we attempt a hill. And we need to train for that, okay? It's really important. Core stability. The back doesn't handle those compressive loads unless you have the strength to kind of help stabilize everything and keep things neutral while we're doing a lot of that. People who run and they're all over the place, that's a lot of torque and a lot of shear through their back. And we see it all the time that can lead to a lot of breakdown. So cross training, and it gets a lot more in detail than that, but cross training is really important.
Yep. So do that strength at home and do some other types of workouts that are not biking and running and swimming to help keep you in good form. So I think now we're going to show the run assessment and what that's going to look like. Are you showing with Adam? Or okay.
Adam will be the model. Again, so this is kind of like phase 2, like we would come in and do a thorough kind of interview of, you know, what your running history is, what your injuries have been, running goals, what you're training for, volume, all that stuff. We can look at your training plan and kind of see how that looks, see if we can tweak that at all to help, because that's really important, being consistent and kind of getting that recovery that you need to build the muscles back up. So we would do that, and then we do a mobility and kind of a strength and mobility screen. And so this is what we would be doing with you guys if you come in. I think we're doing it the 20th and the 27th. We're having free screens for you guys to come in. So I'm going to break out one component and just kind of show you what it's like. There's like 10 to 12 things that we do. It's about 20 minutes long. And so let's do the squat. And so I'm going to have Adam, I think, let's have you face it that way. And I'm going to ask Adam to have his feet kind of where they are, facing forward, shoulder width apart, hip, shoulder width. And I want Adam to kind of come down, do your normal squat. Good. And give me like 3 or 4. So I'm going to look at it from like different angles. I'm looking at, is Adam able to kind of keep his core engaged and not kind of lose it at the bottom there? Is Adam able to get all the way down to 90 degrees here? So he's getting pretty close. That looks good. His ankles aren't coming up from the ground is his upper body coming way forward to compensate for that movement if he doesn't have like a, exactly. So is it kind of crossing this line of his leg there? And so if we saw something like that, we would break it down into different movements. And so we talked a little bit about ankle mobility. So let's kind of show you what we would do to kind of, one reason Adam could be going forward like he just did is because his ankle mobility is a little bit limited. And so we could follow up and kind of test that with him. And I'll show you how we do that. Let's have you sit. Can you guys see there? And so we're going to have Adam, you mind taking your shoe off? Oh. We're going to have Adam take his shoe off. Take your hand and kind of line it up with the end of your foot there. Okay? This way. Face that one. Yes. Okay. I'm going to line the foam roller up with his hand. Come on back up. And then I'm going to ask him to slide forward, keeping his heel on the ground, and try to make contact with the foam roller with his knee. So he can kind of just make it. His ankle's coming up a little bit. But he's wanting to kind of roll in. So this looks like he might be a little bit limited with his ankle mobility. And so we would do something to address this, probably by doing like a calf stretch, or we would check his ankle mobility, and kind of, we have some other stuff that we might give him, which we have time to go over today. But this is kind of, we talked about the plantar fasciitis. So this would be something that we'd kind of check out. It's a good, just kind of overall screen to say, okay, you might be kind of at risk for having something like that happen because your ankle mobility is limited. And that's kind of how we look at this. So we would do like 10 to 12 things like this. Kind of see the patterns that develop. It'll usually be the same thing kind of over and over again. And then we would kind of move on to the running video gait analysis, where we look at a lot of different factors with running, kind of like things that you do while you're running that could lead to injury as well. And we would address that all with exercises and stretches as we find it.
Great.
You want to hop on the treadmill?
All right, so we're going to show you what that run analysis looks like. I've had the
jeans if you come from running analysis.
yeah, wear some shorts. I've had the
Running jeans.
pleasure of having to run on this treadmill with
So-
Matt.
Yeah, and so we have it set up so we can do some live kind of gait retraining. But on the first day here, we would kind of come in. We would do some video gait analysis. So we'd have you get up to your kind of normal running speed. We'll just have Adam run for just a second. And the way we have it set up, it allows you to kind of see yourself while you're running. So I could give Adam some cues to change his form if we're working on that. I could also video here, which is what we do during our analysis. And let's see what we find here. Okay. You want to walk for a second? Yep. And then we would kind of, it's important to kind of look at this in slow motion. That way you can really get a good idea of what you're seeing. And so we really break this down. And for example, look at Adam when he lands here. We would just kind of draw the angle and see how straight his leg is when he lands. And so we have data that kind of shows us the ranges you kind of want to be in based on the normative values and people to get hurt, how hard you're hitting the ground based on this angle. And we might kind of do this, work on some strength stuff, work on some mobility and the running form, and kind of come back and do it again. And hopefully we see some improvements. But this is kind of our way to take some stuff out and track it.
Awesome. Well, I think that's most of the information we wanted to cover this morning, right? Did you want to show anything else with this?
I think so.
Okay.
Pretty much.
Um,
I'm going to be sweating soon.
I know. You didn't know you were getting a second workout. All right. So if you have any questions, feel free to throw them in. We'll be in for a few more minutes here live. Otherwise, you're welcome to email us and we'll share those questions with the team here. Again, this is Matt and Adam with Joints in Motion. They have a location here and in Goose Creek. On the 20th and 27th from 4 to 6:30, they're going to be offering, or is it 4:30 to 6? 4 to 6:30, they're going to be offering free assessments like you just saw a small part of here. And it'll be your chance as a She Tries participant to get started off on the right foot, pun intended, with your training this season and learn some exercises that you can do also while you're at home and preparing to cross train. So thank you for joining us this morning. I know it's early on a Sunday.
Thanks, guys. Good luck, everyone.
And happy training. Have a great day. Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
Bye.